Hi, my name is Stephanie, and having the excuse to interview a leader for a class assignment was such an eye-opener to myself, to be able to put what I have learned in my leadership classes to the test, to see if an everyday leader embodies the specific traits and attributes I have learned about to be a successful leader. I hope you enjoy my video on my leadership interview. I know I had an amazing time conducting the interview and putting this all together. First, let me give you a little background about why I chose my interviewee and how I met him. This summer, I had the opportunity to participate in what is called a clinical observation. I'm able to gain college credit by making various rotations at the hospital in different departments. One of my favorite departments was volunteering on the medical surgical nursing floor. While on this floor, I reported to Anthony, the charge nurse, each day. A charge nurse is responsible for overseeing the floor of nurses for the assigned shift. For the purposes of this interview, I had the privilege to sit down with Anthony for about 20 minutes during one of our shifts together to ask him a few questions about his leadership style. Working in a hospital setting, most professionals don't have much free downtime to sit for an interview. Anthony was so great and took time out of his lunch break to answer some of my questions. During this time, we went aside to his office to conduct this interview without any distractions. I specifically chose to interview Anthony because I wanted to get a little more insight on the administrative side of what it takes to run a successful floor of a hospital wing. My ultimate goal is to become sort of nurse administrator or a charge nurse of a department after gaining some experiences working as a registered nurse for a few years. I chose to interview Anthony because I believe his role and his responsibilities are exactly what I wish to embody in my leadership traits as an individual one day. Side note, Anthony is in his 50s, and when I asked if I could have some of his time to interview, he was extremely excited because he hadn't been a part of an interview as the interviewee, and what he said was a good 20 to 30 years or so. He told me he conducts plenty of interviews himself, so it was a nice relief to be on the other side of it all. My perceptions of Anthony as a leader didn't change much during an interview because I knew who he was before the interview and he acted the same during the interview. Before even sitting down with Anthony, I could tell that he was easy to like type of individual. He had different relationships with each member of his staff on the floor and would participate in some of the jokes and stories some of the nurses would have in their side conversations. When I first walked into Anthony's office, I got the impression that he was very well organized. Everything was labeled and there was not a piece of paper out of place. He had a few sticky notes around his desk with some notes jotted down, but I could tell that those were just reminders for him to finish the tasks in the future. He also had a few quotes posted on the walls of his office, quotes that would inspire not only him, but his workers who came in to talk to him during the day. During the interview, I found Anthony to be very interested in the questions I was asking. He took the time to think of perfect examples of different scenarios he had dealt with in the past that improved his leadership styles. He was even so excited, he showed me some pictures of different aspects of his department, of different things that his nurses had participated in. He even stated by asking a few questions about why I was conducting this interview and if I needed any advice for success with my future. When asked about key leadership characteristics that a leader should embody during the interview, Anthony stressed heavily on the importance of teamwork during his interview. He gave me a few scenarios of various times where teamwork would benefit his nurses during a crisis. For example, he stated that when a nurse is trying to give a patient a shot, sometimes it is important to have another nurse in the room to calm that patient down and distract them while the shot is being administered. During his interview, Anthony stated a very important quote that resonated with me even days after I conducted the interview. He stated that teamwork is the ability to work together toward a common vision. I remember this quote so vividly because it was something that was printed out on a piece of paper and was seen on almost all of the nurses' computer stations. I was even able to find the quote taped to a portion of his wall in his office. He says, as a team leader, it is his responsibility to keep each project his team is working on moving forward. He stated that not one member of his staff works alone. Each person has a buddy for the day, and even that buddy has a buddy. So at times, they could be working in teams of 2 or teams of 4 and so on. He says he never likes to butt in when a couple of individuals are exchanging ideas. He says he always listens to how they are trying to figure out their task on their own because it helps them to improve their overall weaknesses. and he will only intervene if he wants to give them praise or remind them of the overall goal. He says it puts a smile on his face knowing his nurses have a strong relationship with each other and are not afraid to ask for help. This is how he knows he has become a successful leader to his nursing staff, because his nursing staff can work on their own, but they can also work together in a team situation. With teamwork, he also stressed the leadership characteristic of being humble and having a good ear when roaming the floors of the hospital. He told me that sometimes working in a high-stress environment, like a hospital, can become very stressful, working with patients who refuse treatment or getting behind on your work and stressing to catch up. He told me that as a leader, he tries to always be aware of his team members' emotions, and if they're having a bad or stressful day, he pulls them aside to reassure them of their amazing talents. After interviewing Anthony, my perception of him as a leader changed just a little bit. As I was writing his answers down, I could even tell that Anthony embodied another leadership characteristic about himself: trustworthiness. All of the stories and scenarios he was telling me were all aspects that I have noticed myself being a part of the nursing team for just a short period of time. For example, I was shadowing one of the nurses, and all day she kept telling me how she was stressed out with all her patients. Anthony had not been around a lot that day, and for a few seconds he came up to the nurse and gave her a big bear hug to calm her down. All the nurses that I have talked to all looked up to Anthony in the same positive and calming light. They did not look at him as a boss or someone who inflicts rules, but instead as someone to look up to when things are not going their way. Some of the key statements that Anthony made throughout the interview was that he would rather have a member of the team who focused on getting the task done correctly in a longer period of time, rather than having someone who rushed through a task just to get it done. He likes to motivate his team members, and that is one of his main objectives for his nurses to keep focused on every day. He believes it is his responsibility to build a different relationship with each of his nurses to ensure that he understands how each one of them is motivated in a different way. He joked with me once, saying that if I hadn't noticed, he is the only male that was working on this floor. He leads a bunch of female nurses every day, and he says that it can have challenges when they deal with drama, when they have different time of the months that he stated. And he also mentioned that when some of them do become pregnant, they can't do some of the tasks that he thinks that they can do. So he has to adjust his mindset to each individual in a different way. Each situation he deals with each day, each hour, helps to shape him to become a better leader. He also stated that to be a good leader, it is important to identify the characteristics and traits that he excels in, because that you can put those on the back burner. He focused hard on his weaknesses, and he gave me a few of his examples, is that sometimes he can rush through things and that he doesn't take time to think about how others are feeling. He thinks that a good leader focuses on ways that he can improve on his weaknesses. He gave me an example. He asked if I've ever have been a part of an interview process, and I have. He stated that there's a reason many employers ask what your weaknesses are, and it's not for their sake, but for your own. He states that he wants that the new employee to think about what their weaknesses are, so that when they come in on their first day of work, they can be working to improve those weaknesses each day. I had such a great time interviewing Anthony for this assignment. He gave me a great insight into how it is to lead a floor of nurses, and that hopefully I can take what he has taught me in this interview and put it into my leadership skills so I can improve my leadership strategy overall.